Let me ask you something real quick. What's the maximum amount of money you think a person like you could ever make? Not someone smarter, not someone luckier. You. Now notice what just happened in your head. You didn't calculate. You guessed. And that guess? It wasn't random. It came from your parents' stress, from co-workers complaining, from the invisible rules you absorbed without agreeing to. Here's the uncomfortable truth no one says out loud. Most people aren't broke because money is scarce. They're broke because they accepted a number they were never meant to question. You've been trained to think in limits, salary caps, realistic goals. Be grateful. And the system loves that, because people who believe in ceilings never test the walls. Meanwhile, somewhere right now, someone less disciplined than you, less talented than you, and honestly, less aware than you, is making 10 times more money, simply because they never asked if it was possible. They assumed it was. Unlimited money sounds like a fantasy because you were taught to associate ambition with greed, confidence with arrogance, and wanting more with being out of touch. But here's the dark part. If money really is far less limited than you've been told, then the problem was never the economy, your background, or bad timing. It was the box you stepped into and called reality. And once you see how that box was built, you'll never look at money the same way again. You probably felt it while listening to that. A little resistance, a quiet voice saying, "Yeah, but that's not me." That voice is exactly what we're about to talk about. Because before money ever becomes a number in your bank account, it becomes a boundary in your mind. And most of those boundaries weren't built by you. They were handed to you, gently, early, and repeatedly. This is where the invisible ceiling starts. Here's the thing nobody ever points out. You don't decide how much money you want. You inherit it. That number in your head, the one that feels ambitious but realistic, was shaped long before you earned your first dollar. It came from watching adults stress over bills, from hearing phrases like, "People like us don't do that," or "Be grateful you even have a job." So when you imagine more money, your mind doesn't ask how to get it. It asks whether you're allowed to want it. That's the invisible ceiling. It's why you'll grind for years toward a familiar income, but feel strange, almost guilty, imagining 10 times more. Not because it's impossible, but because it feels socially dangerous, like stepping outside the role you were assigned. Think about this. You've probably seen someone in your industry suddenly level up. New lifestyle, new confidence, new circle. And instead of feeling inspired, something in you felt uncomfortable, maybe even judgmental. That reaction isn't jealousy, it's your ceiling trying to protect itself. Because if they can do it, then the question shifts from, "Is it possible, Tanun?" to "Why haven't I?" And that's a much more threatening thought. So your mind does what it was trained to do. It downplays. It's luck. They got connections. They're probably miserable. Not because it's true, but because it keeps your world predictable. Here's the darker part. Systems don't need to cap your income. They just need you to internalize a cap and defend it yourself. That's why most people never even test the ceiling. They negotiate against themselves. They underprice. They wait to be chosen. They stay reasonable. And the moment you start thinking beyond that ceiling, discomfort shows up. Anxiety, fear of judgment, fear of being seen as delusional. But that discomfort isn't a warning. It's a signal. It's the exact point where your old financial identity starts breaking down. And once that happens, there's no unseeing how small the ceiling really was. Once you start noticing the ceiling, something strange happens. You don't just see your limits, you see who quietly ignores them. You start realizing that money doesn't disappear at a certain height. It just stops flowing to people who hesitate. And that's where this gets uncomfortable, because the difference isn't opportunity, it's permission. Look around. Money is moving constantly. Deals closing, prices rising, people paying absurd amounts for things you know aren't that special. So if money were truly scarce, this wouldn't be happening. What's actually scarce is people who feel entitled to receive it. Most of us were raised to believe money must be earned slowly, painfully, and with visible struggle. Anything faster feels suspicious. Anything bigger feels undeserved. So we hesitate. We soften our asks. We explain ourselves. Ever notice how uncomfortable you feel stating a price confidently? Not just high prices. Any price without justification. You feel the urge to add a reason, to defend it, to make the other person comfortable. That hesitation is permission leaking out of your voice. Now compare that to people who charge more than you ever would. They don't rush. They don't over-explain. They don't ask if it's okay. They speak like money already expects to come to them. And here's the part most people don't want to admit. Others take their cues from that energy. Humans don't evaluate value objectively. They mirror certainty. When you act like you're waiting to be approved, people instinctively lower what they're willing to give. When you act like the exchange is normal, even inevitable, they follow. This is why two people with identical skills can live in completely different financial realities. One is talented, but apologetic. The other is average, but assumptive. And the assumptive one wins, not because they're better, but because they never question their right to ask. Here's the darker layer. Society praises humility, but quietly rewards entitlement. Not loud arrogance, calm assumption. The kind that says, "This is the price, take it or leave it." That posture filters people. Some walk away. But the ones who stay, they respect you more for it. Permission works like gravity. Once you give it to yourself, money doesn't need convincing. It just needs a direction. And most people never point it towards themselves, because claiming permission feels risky. It feels like exposure. It feels like stepping into a role you were never trained for. But the moment you stop asking if you're allowed, the game changes. And what comes next is why working harder was never the answer. Once you stop asking for permission, another belief starts to crack. The one you were praised for your entire life, the one that kept you exhausted, but obedient. Hard work. You've worked hard before, really hard. Long hours, late nights, sacrificed weekends, said yes when you wanted to say no. And if hard work was the key to wealth, you wouldn't still be questioning money. That's the part people avoid saying out loud, because hard work feels virtuous. It feels clean. It feels like something no one can criticize. And that's exactly why it became the perfect distraction. Hard work keeps you tired. Tired people don't zoom out. They don't ask uncomfortable questions like, "Why does this effort barely move the needle?" Or, "Who actually benefits from me grinding like this?" Think about it. If effort alone created wealth, the richest people in the world would be the most exhausted. Instead, they're the most detached from the labor. That's not an accident. Hard work doesn't scale. You do. There are only so many hours you can sell, so many tasks you can complete, so many times you can push yourself before your body and mind push back. And yet you were taught to believe that if you just try a little harder, things will finally change. That belief is comforting. It suggests control, but it's also a lie that keeps you locked in place. Look at how people actually make serious money. They separate effort from reward. One decision changes income more than 1,000 hours of labor. One system replaces months of grinding. One leveraged move outperforms years of hustle. But leverage was never emphasized to you, because leverage creates independence, and independence is harder to manage than obedience. Here's the darker truth. Hard work is celebrated publicly because it's safe. It doesn't threaten hierarchy. It doesn't challenge power. It just proves you're willing to endure. And endurance is useful to someone else. That's why you were taught to be proud of being busy, to wear exhaustion like a badge, to equate suffering with progress. Meanwhile, the people who quietly step out of that cycle aren't working harder. They're positioning themselves differently. They're not asking, how much effort can I give? They're asking, where does effort multiply? Once you see that distinction, working harder feels almost irresponsible, because the real game was never about effort. It was about leverage, and once you understand leverage, you'll never romanticize grind the same way again. If hard work isn't the key, then what is? Here's the uncomfortable part. It's not even talent. Yes, you heard that right. The smartest, most skilled, most disciplined people often make less than someone average. And that's because the world doesn't pay for skill alone. It pays for control. Think about the highest earners you know, or those you've read about. Are they all geniuses? Not really. Some are, but a surprising number aren't. What they have in common is control. They control attention, they control decisions, they control access. That's the secret everyone misses. Take attention. Influencers, thought leaders, even business owners, people who own the room financially, don't just work hard. They attract focus. They know how to pull people toward them and make them notice, remember, and eventually pay. Then there's access. Networks, opportunities, insider knowledge, these are rarely earned through talent alone. They're earned by being in the right position, making the right moves, and yes, sometimes by quietly asserting dominance over a space others assume they can't touch. And finally, decisions. The ability to call the shots, to set prices, choose clients, or direct resources is more valuable than any skill you can learn. Because when you control the decisions, you control the money flowing in. Here's the part that stings. Most people never realize they're playing the wrong game. They think climbing a ladder, improving skills, or working harder will get them to the top. But climbing a ladder someone else built means following their rules. And those rules often cap what you can earn. Control flips the game. Suddenly, the same environment that keeps everyone else small becomes your playground. Your influence magnifies every move. Your time stretches. Your money multiplies. And here's the dark layer most people ignore. Control doesn't need to be earned fairly. People respect the appearance of authority more than merit. Confidence, positioning, and strategic choices create outcomes faster than skill ever could. This is why two people with similar talent levels can live in completely different financial worlds. One follows rules, one makes the rules. Once you see that money follows control, not effort, not talent, you realize something frightening. The gap between ordinary income and unlimited income isn't skill, it's boldness, it's strategy. It's the willingness to step into roles others are too polite, too scared, or too conditioned to claim. And the moment you internalize that, the world suddenly feels smaller, because every system that once controlled you now becomes a lever, and the only limit is how much control you're willing to take. So now you see it. Money isn't about effort. It isn't about skill. It isn't even about luck. It's about control, leverage, and claiming permission. But here's the part most people don't tell you. Once you start thinking in unlimited terms, the world gets weird. People around you don't just react, they resist. Unlimited money isn't just a number, it's a mirror. Because when you start imagining truly unlimited money, it exposes something deeper. All the excuses you've been hiding behind. I don't have connections. I'm not lucky. I'll never be that kind of person. All of it starts to feel thin, almost ridiculous, because the system isn't the problem anymore. You are. And that's exactly why it makes people so uncomfortable. Think about it. Look at anyone who suddenly earns far more than their peers. Do you see admiration? Sometimes. But more often you see tension, subtle resentment, uneasy questions, maybe even passive-aggressive warnings. People are threatened not by your wealth, they're threatened by what your wealth implies, that the rules they've been obeying aren't rules at all, that they could have done more, earned more, claimed more, but didn't. This discomfort isn't just external, it creeps inside too. You feel it when you think bigger than your old life allowed. The fear isn't failure, it's exposure. Exposure of what you've been settling for. Exposure of what you've been quietly afraid to want. Here's the darker truth. Unlimited money forces you to face the parts of yourself that are lazy, hesitant, or afraid. It forces you to decide whether you will accept the ordinary or step into the extraordinary. And the social cost? It's real. Friends may pull away, family may judge, your comfort zone shatters. Suddenly, relationships are testing grounds. Some people can't handle your growth. Some people resent it. Some people quietly hope you fail. Unlimited money isn't a fantasy, it's a test of how much you're willing to disrupt your own life, your own identity, and the expectations of everyone around you. Because once you stop caring about what's normal, once you embrace that abundance is possible, the real fear isn't whether you can make money, it's whether you can handle the reactions it creates. And most people, they can't. But you? That's the moment that separates those who stay small forever from those who suddenly see no ceiling at all. By now, you've seen the cracks in the ceiling. You've realized money isn't limited, effort isn't the real key, and control beats talent. But here's where it gets messy. Because thinking big, chasing unlimited money, doesn't just change your bank account. It changes your life, and not always in ways you expect. Here's the truth nobody warns you about. The higher you climb, the more you stand out. When you decide to stop settling for ordinary, the world reacts. Friends become distant. Family questions your motives. People who once relied on you for comfort start to feel threatened. It's not malicious, it's instinct. Humans like predictability. They want the world, and you, to stay exactly where they can handle it. When you break free, their reality shakes, and suddenly, you're the one causing discomfort. Think about it. You pursue a bold idea, a massive income, or a lifestyle that feels unlimited. You start saying no to things that waste your time. You start raising your standards for work, relationships, and even how people treat you, and it hits people like a shock wave. Some quietly pull away, some get defensive, some throw subtle criticisms. Be careful, don't get greedy, remember where you came from. All of it is code for, your growth scares me. And here's the darkest part. This isn't just social friction. There's an internal cost, too. Your mind starts wrestling with doubt. Am I being selfish? Am I overreaching? Will I lose people I love? Unlimited money and thinking big demand trade-offs. Comfort is gone. Familiarity is gone. The quiet approval you once relied on vanishes. You become a stranger in rooms you once felt safe in. Some people freeze here. They scale back. They lower their goals to fit the expectations of others. They trade freedom for comfort. Others, they push through. They embrace the isolation, the judgment, the tension, and the fear. They realize that thinking big always comes with cost. And the higher the ambition, the higher the price. The real cost isn't money lost. It's relationships strained. It's self-doubt. It's stepping into a world that reacts violently to your audacity. And yet, it's also the only cost that guarantees growth. Because no one who thinks small ever changes their life or anyone else's. So ask yourself, are you willing to pay the price? To risk comfort, to risk judgment, to risk the quiet stability you've always known, for a life without limits? Because once you decide, there's no going back. If you've made it this far, one thing should be clear. Unlimited money isn't about luck, talent, or even hard work. It's about mindset. But here's the twist most people miss. Mindset alone isn't safe. Thinking big comes with risk, and the higher you aim, the sharper those risks feel. Unlimited money starts in your mind, not your bank account, not your job, not your skill set. It begins with removing every limit you've unconsciously accepted. Most people never do this. They tiptoe around their ambitions. They hedge, they justify, they lower expectations. And that keeps them safe. Safe from failure. Safe from judgment. Safe from having to see themselves as more than ordinary. But here's the reality. Unlimited money isn't safe. And thinking it is deadly. Once you adopt the mindset, everything changes. Suddenly, you're no longer asking permission. You're no longer apologizing. You're no longer playing small, and the world reacts hard. Some people will envy you. Some will resent you. Some will quietly sabotage opportunities just because they can't handle your audacity. Even your closest circle may push back, sometimes out of fear, sometimes out of jealousy, sometimes because they've grown comfortable in the limitations they've accepted. And the internal risk is just as sharp. Fear will creep in. Doubt will whisper. You'll wrestle with questions no one else will ask you. Am I being too greedy? Am I overstepping? Am I betraying who I used to be? These are the crossroads most people never reach. They settle, they shrink, they cling to the small, familiar version of themselves because it's safer than facing the uncomfortable truth. Once you remove limits, you're responsible for everything that happens next. Because here's the dark psychology behind it. Most people externalize control. They blame the economy, the system, bad luck, or other people. But when your mindset breaks free, there's no one left to blame. Your results or failures are yours alone. That's terrifying, and it's why most people never step into it. Unlimited money is a mindset that forces you to own your life, to claim audacious permission, to control leverage, to face social friction, to confront fear. And it's exhilarating, and dangerous, and lonely. But here's the truth nobody tells you. The moment you stop fearing the risk, that's when money stops being limited. The ceilings vanish, the excuses disappear. The world starts bending toward those who refuse to stay small. Unlimited money isn't a fantasy. It's a consequence of courage. And the scariest part, once you've tasted it, you'll never want to go back. So here's what you do next. Don't just walk away and go back to small thinking. Let this sit. Let it make you uncomfortable. Let it push you, because the people who make unlimited money aren't special. They're just bold enough to ignore limits everyone else swears are real. If you want more ways to break ceilings, claim control, and see the world differently, hit that subscribe button smash the like, and turn on notifications. And comment below, I'm ready to stop asking permission. Because once you decide that, you'll realize just how small your old limits really were. Remember, the moment you stop fearing risk, the moment you stop shrinking to fit the world, that's when money stops being scarce.